I'm one of those guys who came to Washington in 1981 to do a government gig and expected to be here to stay here for a year. Well, that was 1981, and this is what, 2009? I fell for it. I fell for the place, and you know, how could you not fall for this? I mean, this is not a bad front yard. Not that I do not actually live in the Lincoln Memorial, though I would be happy to if the government offered it. The Lincoln Memorial, you know, the thing about Washington that we perhaps don't realize or take for granted is that it's a city with active Greek and Roman temples. What other city in the world can boast active temples? What do I mean by that? Well, look, here we are on a normal weekday at the Lincoln Memorial, and look how many people are here. And although they look like they're just having a nice vacation or whatever, they have come to pay homage to America's greatest president, as it says in this temple, and in the hearts of those for whom he preserved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever. This memorial was dedicated in 1922, which, when you think about it, is a long time after his assassination in 1865, which maybe suggests that we ought not to rush into building memorials. What's remarkable about this one, well, there are a lot of remarkable things about it, but it was dedicated in 1922, and present was Robert Todd Lincoln, the president's only surviving child. Who died, I think, just a few years later. What makes that perhaps poignant, Robert Todd Lincoln was a teenager when his father was shot. He was at a theater not far from Ford's Theater, watching a play called Aladdin and His Marvelous Lamp, or His Magic Lamp. People burst into the theater and started shouting, "The president has been shot." Robert Todd Lincoln went to the Peterson House where his father died. In 1881, Robert Todd Lincoln was Garfield's Secretary of War and accompanied him to the old Baltimore and Ohio Railroad station. Garfield was on his way to his, I think, 25th college reunion at Williams when he was shot, and of course mortally. In 1901, Robert Todd Lincoln was with McKinley in Buffalo when McKinley was shot. So you have this extraordinary American coincidence of the son of Abraham Lincoln being present at two subsequent assassinations. The other poignant thing about the dedication of the Lincoln Memorial was that the president of Tuskegee Institute spoke. Tuskegee being one of the few, as they were then called, Negro or colored colleges. And after he spoke, he could not sit with the other dignitaries. He had to go sit in the colored section. How remarkable is it that 40 some odd years later, the second most famous speech in American history, may call it third, was delivered just a few feet from where I'm standing by Martin Luther King. Of course, I Have a Dream speech. On the two walls here are engraved what I would consider the two most famous speeches in American history. Of course, the Gettysburg Address and Lincoln's second inaugural.
Down, slowly.
This would have been Martin Luther King's view as he gave the I Have a Dream speech in August of 1963. Imagine looking out at, 200,000 people gathered on that day, all of them focused on you as you spoke those incredibly stirring words.
We talked earlier about walking over to the Fdr Memorial.
Sure.
Is that where you want to go next?
Yeah, let's do that. With all due respect to President Roosevelt, I find this a tad severe as memorials go. Now, you know, in all fairness, he the two great acts of his presidency were the Depression and World War II. So I don't suppose there's any reason it should be, look like something from My Fair Lady. But it has a certain heaviness to it that is lacking in many of the other memorials. Here's the famous statue of him, which maybe it's the English major in me, but looking at it, he looks to me like James Joyce on a toilet, sitting on a toilet. There's just something about it, but I'm certainly not making fun of his disability, but this statue was put here at the insistence of the Disabled Americans organization, and there was indeed a controversy over it because, as I recall, FDR's heirs wanted to respect his FDR's never wanting to be photographed in his wheelchair. And there is, in fact, I don't think there is a photograph of him in a wheelchair, and so they found this to be rather against his wishes, but here it is. Let's hope that it gives comfort and encouragement to those who are disabled, and see that great things can be done by a man who was confined to a wheelchair. It's one of the larger memorials. I think it takes up something like 7.5 acres, which is a lot of real estate. But it's intended, it's divvied up. There's a narrative to it as you move from 1933 to the end of his term in 1945. It's hard to look at this particular part of the FDR Memorial as we're going through this period, which we're told is the greatest depression since the Great Depression. But to put it in perspective, at the height of that depression, unemployment had reached 80% in some parts of the country. And there was, of course, not the so-called safety nets that we have now, but this does give us pause right now when so many people are out of jobs and the economy continues in its difficulties. This is, I suspect, how President Roosevelt would have liked to be memorialized in his dashing cape, the wheelchair not visible. There was, of course, that wonderful photograph of him taken on the bridge of a destroyer, where he was probably, come to think of it, I think he was perhaps the last president who would have been unafraid to be photographed smoking a cigarette. I don't think we'll see many photos of our current president, Mr. Obama, sneaking a cigarette, as he apparently is wont to do. And here we have Fala, the FDR's Scotty, who was his devoted companion. There's a saying that seems kind of apropos to quote in this, just the week after the Obamas settled on their dog, Bo. But there's a saying, perhaps a sad saying in Washington, that if you want to have a friend in Washington, get a dog. But I think by all accounts, Fala was a very good friend to his devoted master.